Good morning. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Gruber, as the voice said from the heavens, the executive director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and I am just so happy to be here with all of you this morning to see so many friends and colleagues coming together. You know, growth, we keep hearing about it. It is this omnipresent issue. We have been growing, we are growing today, and we will continue to grow in the future. And we have all of that growth occurring here on the Wasatch Front in a limited geographic area, right? We're bounded by the mountains on one side and then the lake and the mountains on the other. And so what I want to talk with you about today is looking ahead. First, I want to ask you to think about the impacts that growth will have on our quality of life if we stay on the current path we're on. And then I want to talk with you about what we call the Wasatch Choice 2050 vision, a draft for how we can work together to continue to have great quality of life in the future. And then finally, I want to talk about our opportunity to work together, to collaborate, to make sure we have a bright future in the generations to come. So let's start with looking at some of those potential impacts if we stay on the path that we're on. First, the amount of time that we spend traveling today, the average resident on the Wasatch Front spends about just under an hour traveling. And as we look ahead, if we stay on the path that we're on, that's going to grow to over an hour and 40 minutes. Now, we're not just spending more time traveling. We all know that we feel this sort of crowding, right, as population grows, and we see this in our public spaces. The visitation in Utah's national parks has doubled from 2006 to 2016. And closer to home right here in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons, we experience lots of crowding in the winter, but also in the summer. It happens year-round. Another impact is things are getting more expensive. This is actually data from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. What this chart is showing you is over time, basically essentially by decade, what it's showing you is the number of new households, that's that population growth coming, in contrast to the number of new housing units that are being built. And what we'll see here is for the first time in a long time, the number of households is actually exceeding the number of new housing units. So basic economics, when demand exceeds supply, the price goes up. So we're seeing a 7 to 8% increase in housing prices every year, which clearly is exceeding the rate of income growth. That's a challenge. Another one, we all know this, air quality. Now, we know the facts are that our air quality is actually getting better. But we also know more about air quality and its impacts on our health and on our economy. And so we know that we have to do more about this. And in fact, in surveys that Envision Utah has done, they've found consistently that residents along the Wasatch Front, all of us, rank air quality among the top 3 issues of importance for our future, year in and year out. So where does that leave us? What's our path forward? What choice do we take? One thing we know is that we cannot take our quality of life for granted. There's uncertainty and risk that are created by these trends that I'm talking about. So will our children and our grandchildren be able to live here? Will they want to live here in the future? The good news is that it is not new for Utahns to come together and confront challenges like this. Some people have called it our secret sauce of collaboration. We come together, we make a plan, and we move forward. And we know this because the choices that we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what the Wasatch Choice for 2050 is all about. It's a blueprint for our future, for transportation and land use and economic development, and it's all about preserving and encouraging that great quality of life in the future. So let me remind you, many of you have been very involved in this process from all over the Wasatch Front. Let me remind you a little bit about where we've been. We started several years ago by identifying key goals for our region that we all share. Livable and healthy communities, quality transportation choices, clean air, access to opportunities, ample parks and open spaces, and others. And then we developed scenarios, which are essentially like images of paths looking forward into the future and which ones will best meet those goals. And then we took input on those to come up with a preferred scenario, a vision, if you will, which is what the Wasatch Choice 2050 is about, that draft that we have for you today. After we do this, we'll finalize the vision, and then we will develop the exact specifics of what projects and what investments need to be made to achieve that vision. So before I show you the vision itself, what I want to do is talk with you about some key strategies. The vision is based on 4 key strategies. Strategy number 1, provide transportation choices. As we look back, we have made significant investments in our transportation system. So this chart is actually looking backwards. It starts at 1995 and goes out to 2015. The green bar is showing the delay that we are experiencing in our travel. And you can see that it has actually gone up. We know this, right? We experience congestion. It has gone up. But that is reflecting the investments that we've made, huge investments in rebuilding I-15 and building Mountain View Corridor and building an entirely new public transit system, the TRAX and Frontrunner. If we had not made those investments over time, we would be on that blue line, and our delay would be 2.5 times what it is today. So continuing to make those investments to provide choices to people for how they get around is what's embodied in Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. This is the plan that looks out ahead to the future and identifies what investments do we need to make in transportation. And this Wasatch Choice process that is broader than just transportation will help us to shape the next version of Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. And let me just give you an example of what this looks like then in the future. Starting with today, in terms of choices, households along the Wasatch Front, about 21% of them have access within a quarter mile to frequent and reliable transit service. And 40% of households have access within a quarter mile to a safe and dedicated bikeway. But in the vision, that will grow to 37% having access to transit and 73% having access to bikeways. So, if we do this, these transportation choices, what's it going to mean? Well, one metric I showed you already is if we stay on our current path, the amount of time we spend traveling will grow to over 1 hour and 40 minutes. And if we implement the vision, it will be, we model this and project 1 hour and 20 minutes. Now let me pause and ask the question whether that in of itself is acceptable. And it may not be. And if it's not, then that means we have additional choices to make, which I will say candidly may be politically challenging. Congestion pricing on our roads, free transit, using a vehicle miles traveled approach to paying for transportation rather than the outmoded gas tax. One thing we know that we need to do is take advantage of innovations and technological advancements that are coming. So autonomous, connected, and shared vehicles. What we know about those technological advancements for certain is that they will have a huge impact on our transportation and our life in the region. What we don't know for certain is what that impact will be. I've actually seen studies recently that say the impact of all of those vehicle technologies could reduce the number of vehicle miles being traveled by about 40%, or it could increase the number of vehicle miles being traveled by as much as 80%. So what we know we need to do is take the best advantage of technology and innovation to help us absorb our growth. Okay, strategy number 2, support housing options. Now today, the basic mix of housing that we have along the Wasatch Front is about 75-25. 75% single-family homes, 25% multifamily, so think townhomes or condos or apartments. As we look out ahead to the future, with the market trends that we see coming, that mix is going to need to shift to about 60-40. 60% single-family, 40% multifamily. In other words, a 15% increase in the percentage of our households that are living in multifamily. Now, I want to be really clear about this. This is not government telling people the right way to live. This is responding to the market, and it's responding to demographic changes and providing choices. And the good news is that if we do this, if we allow for more growth in multifamily housing, it's going to actually allow us to better preserve the character of existing suburban and rural communities. Strategy number 3, preserve open space. Now, this is our iconic mountains that are so key to our quality of life, but it's also about preserving critical farmland and having parks and trails that are just woven right into the fabric of our communities. And the development patterns that we're projecting from today, looking out ahead to the future, in the vision, will save over 27,000 acres and preserve them for open space. Okay, so those strategies again: provide transportation choices, support housing options, preserve open space. Strategy number 4 is where the magic really happens, and that is linking development and transportation decisions. We can, by doing that coordination and linkage, get the maximum efficiency and effectiveness out of our investments, achieve the highest return on investment, and achieve the best outcomes. So let me give you an example. If there is multifamily housing that is placed in close proximity to high-capacity transit, then the folks that are living there are going to have access to more jobs within a reasonable amount of time. If businesses are locating closer to highway interchanges, then those businesses are going to have access to more customers and workers and suppliers. So it's this coordination that enhances the overall performance of the system. Now, this is true in newly developing areas, but it's also just as true in redevelopment of areas that are already developed. Infill and redevelopment opportunities. I mean, you think our economy is changing, right? And there's outmoded commercial areas that provide a ripe opportunity for reimagining in your communities what kind of mix of uses that we could have that take advantage of this coordination. So what I want to do now is I want to show you the Wasatch Choice 2050 vision and demonstrate for you the interplay among all of these strategies. So this is an image of the interactive map of the Wasatch Choice 2050 draft vision for the whole region. And just so you can see a little more clearly, what I want to do is I'm going to zoom in and I'll show you southern Davis County and northern Salt Lake County. I'll zoom in and I'll also turn off all those data layers. And let me bring them back on one by one so you can see that interplay. So centers, where is development going to be occurring in the future? And job areas, where will people be working in the future? Open space that we need to preserve. And then the transportation investments that integrate with those things. So roadways and transit and active transportation, our trail systems. Now, because this interactive map is the tool, it's the portal through which you can get information and then also provide feedback, I want to take a minute to walk you through how this actually works. So the starting point is go to our website, wfrc.org, and you'll be able to bring up the interactive map right from the homepage. And when you go there, you have the ability to zoom in on your community, areas that you care about, focus in so that you can get more information about the areas that are most important to you. Then, on the right side of the map, that's where you're able to turn the layers on and off that I was talking about with you. You can pick and choose. You can turn on transportation projects of all different types. You can also bring up those centers that I was mentioning to you and see different types of centers around the region. Importantly, you can also turn on the economic clusters that we have right now to compare and contrast development. And then you're able to click on individual projects or centers or portions of the region to get more information about those specific investments. On the left side of the map is all sorts of data and information that you can utilize to look at, to learn more. Like you can bring up images of different development types. You also have the ability to see the performance of the vision on a whole bunch of metrics that tie to those goals I mentioned before, comparing the vision with where we are today. Then you also have the ability to zoom into particular sub-areas of the region. So let's take a look at eastern Weber County, and you can get the performance metrics for those specific portions of the region. And this is important because there is no one-size-fits-all approach. We are talking about a broad regional vision, but each community, each of you in your communities, in your areas, you need to be, and you know this, you need to be thinking about what works for you, what is best for your future. And so no one strategy is right for every community. So you can therefore go in and see what's best for you within that broader regional perspective. And then finally, and so important, is your ability to provide comments. So if you click on the icon right at the bottom of the map, the push pin, you can identify types of comments, and you can drop them right into the map on specific projects or development strategies. And in that way, we can all engage in a broad community conversation. So we hope that you will use this. It's up on our website right now. What does this mean? What does this mean if we do this? What are the outcomes if we implement this vision? Let me just tick through a few of them. One, better access to jobs. If we coordinate our investments in the way that the vision is contemplated, we'll increase the number of jobs that the average household on the Wasatch Front can access within 30 minutes by 57%, or another 166,000 jobs compared to the current path we're on. Cleaner air. This chart is showing over time from 2010 projected out to 2050 the mobile source emissions. And we know, we've said this already, that we're having lower emissions, right? And as you look, the black line there is the 2015. And so from today out to 2050, if we implement the vision, we'll have a real reduction in mobile source emissions of 59%. So why is that happening? We know that the biggest single reason is because there's fleet turnover, right? Our cars and trucks are getting cleaner with Tier 3 fuel and vehicles. But it's also because of the transportation choices that I'm talking about and the development patterns. So if we give more people, the ability to walk or bike or take transit, then they can drive shorter distances or maybe even leave the car at home and not have that cold start to the engine, which is when the majority of the emissions occur. Another benefit is lower infrastructure costs, saving money on infrastructure. So you know, of course, as we develop, we have at the local level road costs, sewer, water, power, capital costs that come with development. Well, if we develop in the way that's contemplated in the vision, we will save at the local level close to $6 billion between now and 2050. So this is fiscally prudent also to develop in this way. And then finally, improved health. Now, those of you that were at the last Wasatch Choice event, you may remember Tyler Norris from the healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente. He talked to us about what the healthcare companies are really looking at in terms of health outcomes. And it was really interesting because he pointed out that the quality of medical care, that's that green dial right there, is actually a relatively small factor in health outcomes, only 10%. The most significant impact is from personal behaviors, 40%. And so, again, if we're providing people with trails and sidewalks and access to active living, then that means that they're going to be walking more, they're going to be more physically active, and they're going to be healthier. Another factor that Tyler talked about is environmental and social factors. And this is something that we really need to think about together as a community. According to the Utah Department of Workforce Services, in Utah right now, we have 60,000 children who are living in intergenerational poverty. We have a moral imperative to not leave these children, these families, these communities behind. But we also have an economic imperative, because if we can provide better access to opportunities to jobs and education to these communities, we're going to increase the number of people who are productively engaged in the economy, and we're going to decrease our costs on social services. So, what we're really talking about is the overall health and prosperity and quality of life for our entire region. That is what we're talking about today. We have a choice for our future. We have challenges of growth, but we have a track record, the Utah way of coming together and collaborating and setting a vision for the future and making it a reality. And you, all of you, whether you are a business leader, a local elected official or staff, or you're a community advocate, all of you, all of us together are in positions to make a real difference by the choices we make together to make a bright future. And that is what Wasatch Choice 2050 is all about. Thank you very much.